Hello, this is Tim Rohr from the Utah Conservatory, and this is one of our week 3 videos in our music theory for composition course. Today we're going to be dealing with rhythm. When dealing with melodies, the pitches in a melody don't always have the same length for every single pitch. If it did, that would become quickly monotonous and very boring. Because of this, composers will write different lengths for different notes, and that helps give variety to the piece. This goes back to our discussion of tension and release in music, which you can find a link for that video in the comments below. But I want to give you an example of what it would sound like if we had something that did have all of the notes the same length. Now, believe it or not, that was actually a very well-known piece of music by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. I want to play that again and show you how it sounds with different lengths of pitches. So because length of pitch is so crucial, how would a composer then go about showing different pitch lengths? How would they show how long to play notes for? I want to use a simple example for this that I call rhythm pi. So if you imagine for a second that we have a whole pie right here, and if I want to cut this pie in half, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a line straight through the middle like that. And if I want to cut it into quarters, I'm going to add another line. And if I want to cut it into eighths and so forth, we keep adding to this pie, and that helps give us smaller and smaller pieces. In a similar way to our pie, we start with a circle, a whole note right here. Now we're going to be referring to these as certain beat lengths, and those beats are faster or slower depending on what the composer will tell the musicians. Like we'll talk about that at another time, but allegro means a faster beat, adagio means a slower beat. But we're going to say for right now that these are all pretty much the same beat. So this we're going to say is 4 beats long, this whole note, and it would go like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we would hold that note for the whole thing, so it would sound like this. Do, and then we'd cut it off after the 4th beat. Now, if I want to do something that's only 2 beats, what I do is I'm going to cut this in half by adding something like we had in our pie example. And what I'm going to add is a stem off to the side. And that means that that whole note is now going to be cut into 2 separate half notes. And those half notes are now 2 beats long. If I want to cut my half note in half, I'm going to add something to this also. I'm going to fill it in the middle, and that's going to give me a quarter note. So I can cut a half note into 2 quarter notes. And this will just keep going on, that we keep adding things. So this is where this gets a little bit trickier. We've got a quarter note here, and I'm going to add a flag to it, and that gives me an 8th note. I can divide that up into 2 8th notes, that quarter note. Now, in addition to dividing it up with the little flag on the side, we can also turn this into a little bit of a different appearance with a beam on the bottom. And it means exactly the same thing, but it's easier to draw, easier to write on the page, and easier to see with a beam on the bottom rather than individual flags. Now, in a similar way, we've got our 8th note here, and I'm going to either add another flag like this to cut this in half into a 16th note, or I'm going to cut this in half like this. I'm going to add 2 beams on the bottom, and that gives me 16th notes again, but just a different appearance, easier to write it than to every single one of those to add a flag to them. Now this is the basic rundown of all this. We've got our half note, we cut that in half, and that gives us half notes. We've got quarter notes there, and we've got 8th notes, and then we've got 16th notes. So each one gets smaller and smaller. So our half notes are half of the whole note. Our quarter notes are quarter of the whole note. 8th notes are an 8th of the whole note, and so forth. Now there are instances in which a composer wants a musician not to play anything for a certain length of time, and we refer to these as rests. And I want to show you the general breakdown of rests. The way I've heard to remember these first couple is, well, starting with the whole note, that a whole gentleman will take his hat off to you, because this looks like a hat that has been tipped upside down. If we cut that one in half, then what we've got are two half rests right there. And the way I've heard to remember this is a half a gentleman will keep his hat on. We break these down, and those turn into quarter rests. And then we have eighth rest right here, and 16th rest at the bottom right there. Now, there are other possible rests as well as notes. If we added another little flag off to the side of the rest there, then that would be a 32nd rest. If we added another flag or another beam to a 16th note, then that would turn it into a 32nd note. But that's just the general basic rundown of these. Now, if we just threw all of these different lengths of pitches up on a page without organizing them, it could get quickly and easily confusing to try and put a piece of music together the way a composer intended it. And because of this, we have something called time signatures as well as measures. So a time signature is a way to achieve some sense of organization within a piece of music. I like to think of this as sort of like a bookshelf. A bookshelf is designed to organize books into a certain order. You might have a bookshelf that's all dedicated to one specific type of book, or you might have certain authors with last names on a book. And however, they're only a certain length long. And because of this, you can more easily find all of these books because of the small little chunks that they're placed in. So I want you to imagine for just a second a 4-inch bookshelf. So we've got our 4-inch bookshelf here. And what we're going to do is we're going to place some different books on here. So if I wanted to, I could place a 1-inch book several times on this bookshelf, and I can fit 4 different 1-inch books on here. Or if I wanted to, I could also put a 2-inch book, and then a 1-inch book, and a 1-inch book. Now, taking this sort of a length of a bookshelf, I want you to think of this now as a length of time. Now what we've got here is one measure of a 4/4 time. And what that means is that every measure is going to have 4 quarter notes in it. Let me show you now the structure of a time signature. So every time signature, unless there's a shorthand, will have 2 numbers on it, and the bottom number indicates what the beat is per measure. In this instance, because there's a 4 on the bottom, we're going to be dealing with quarter notes. The top number is what tells you how many of that beat are going to be for each measure. So in this instance, we've got a 4/4 time signature, and that means that every measure is going to have 4 quarter notes in it. So here are some time signatures. We've got 4/4 time again, which is 4 quarter notes per measure. We've got this C right here, and this is a shorthand 4/4/4 time. It's just a quicker way of writing it. We've got 3/4 time, and this is going to mean that we've got still quarter notes as our beat, but we've got 3 quarter notes per measure. We've also got, this is slightly different, this is 2/2 time. We've got as our beat a half note, and they're going to be 2 half notes per measure. And the shorthand for that is this C with a slash through it, meaning cut time. Now this is slightly different from common time or 4/4 time. It's very similar, but our beat emphasis is not going to be on the quarter note, it's actually going to be the half note. And we can talk about this a little bit more in a later video. Now in every measure, the first beat is the most important out of all of these beats. And the reason for that is just like if you're talking in a sentence and you put the emphasis on different syllables, it takes on a different meaning. Like if I say that same sentence, put the emphasis on the incorrect syllable, then what we've got is a sentence that you can still sort of make out, but it means something different, and it's harder to make out because of that. And because of the way our beat system works, the first beat of almost every measure will be most important. Now that is all the time that we've got for today, this brief run through of rhythm. There will be an optional video for the course also dealing with some more complicated stuff. We've got simple versus compound meters, ties, dotted rhythms, and triplets, duples, quintuples, and so forth, as well as some more structure of a measure as far as beats go. But for today, that is all the time we've got, and we look forward to seeing you in another video.